Welcome to EMTalk, true stories of saving lives from the people who saved them. This episode, how does that make you feel? Mental health in first responders. Here to discuss saving lives is licensed paramedic and executive vice president at Texas EMS School, your host, Juddson Smith.
Hello. Red Bull gives you wings. That is for our new sponsorship that I'm hoping to obtain from Red Bull. So today with us is someone who doesn't like Red Bull, which doesn't really help my campaign here to getting on with the Red Bull company. But, you know, I'll fight my own battle there. We have Melissa Berrie, and Melissa is the lead instructor for Texas EMS School. She is a paramedic, and she is a big proponent and supporter of mental health awareness in the first responder community. And so I thought, you know, it's Suicide Awareness Month. We need to talk about that before the month ends so that we can put some notice on it, because it's something that we kind of avoid talking about usually in the first responder world. So, Melissa, thank you for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm going to let you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and bring it around to how you got into EMS and how you ended up here.
Oh, wow. Well, I really never wanted to be an EMS. I'll be honest. It's something that just kind of happened. I believe that God put you on a path and you're going to end up there because it's going to bring him glory one day. But I had a little girl a little too early, and her lungs collapsed shortly after birth. And they told me she wasn't going to make it where we had her, which was in San Angelo. So we flew her to Fort Worth. And she coded 3 times in flight. So they went ahead and took her to Cook Children's Hospital in Fort Worth. And I gave consent over the cell phone for life support for Michaela. She wasn't going to make it. She wasn't going to be alive by the time I got to her. And so they put her on a machine called ECMO. It's extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. And at that time, I was a housewife. I had a 4-year-old in tow with me. But I didn't have any medical knowledge, and I was afraid of this baby. Michaela ended up making it. She'll be 26 on the 30th. She's giving me a grandson. I like him more than I like her. But it's one of those things that I was afraid of her. And luckily for me and for her, Cooks makes you take a BLS course before you can even strap that baby in a car seat to come home. I wish every hospital in America would do that. I think it's a great thing that they do, because Michaela got out of the NICU around 3 months old. And from the time she was 3 months to 12 months, I resuscitated her 3 times by myself until medics got to my house. So that was my first dealings with paramedics, was when she was born and the flight crew came and got her. And then whenever they would come to my home and take her, you know, to resuscitate her. But anyway, I rocked along, she rocked along, and I was working at the VA, and they had a EMT class open up, and I said, you know what, I would really like to take that class. And I was like a sponge. I soaked up everything. And anyway, I fell in love with paramedicine. That was my start in it. It wasn't anything that I planned or had a dream or aspired to be, but I couldn't imagine being anything else now. So I love instructing it. I have a passion for EMS, and I hope that is conveyed to my students whenever I'm teaching. But I, you know, it hasn't always been easy. There's a lot of things in EMS that you're going to see, you're never going to unsee. Things you're going to hear, you're never going to unhear it. And also things you'll smell that you'll never unsmell. We all know about that, right?
This is true. So
Yeah.
On that note, have you ever at any of the conferences been by the booth that has the scents?
Yes, I have. And
Have
I
you
know
smelled
better.
them?
Yeah, well, only one time. And you know I don't do puke, right? Remember, I always tell my students, when my babies were little and they puke in the floor, I cover it with newspaper till my husband got home. I can't deal with
Yeah,
puke.
that's what like an 8-year-old would do if they spilled something.
Can't help it. Still do it. I would. I'm just saying, I don't do puke. I can do poop. I can't do puke. But
I don't like
anyway.
either one all that much.
Anyway, But yes, I have smelled those smells, but I've also smelled them out in the field too, as well. Things that you can smell again, and you'll be like, "Oh, I remember that time." You
Oh,
know what I
yeah.
mean? That will bring that whole call back to you. Kind of like sounds will, or just being on a certain scene will bring back memories of scenes that you've been on, and so that's where mental health comes into play. And I think September being, mental health awareness month, or suicide awareness month, I guess you could say. We should probably be talking about this more often than just once, a year.
It's
you know?
enough. It's enough.
Well, I know it's not a lively topic. I know it's not a fun topic, right? But I think it's an important topic. I know that in my career, I've had friends that I've lost to suicide. And it hasn't been that long ago. I lost another one. I was down in New Braunfels teaching a class whenever they were doing his service. And it was hard. It's hard every single time that it happens. And unfortunately, it's happening a lot. And, I don't believe there's a prevention to suicide. I think you would have to be there at that most dire moment in order to prevent a suicide. I believe we could talk about it all day, and somebody still, if they want to commit suicide, they're going to go commit suicide. It's one of those things that we can't prevent it. We can just let our brothers and sisters in the first responder world know that we love them, we care about them, and it is okay to talk about it. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to have feelings when you get off a call that aren't normal. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I guess the feelings probably are normal.
The feelings
just
are
don't like 'em.
normal, but we shouldn't be going to bed at night thinking about these calls. We should be enjoying time with our family when we're not on duty. And if we're not enjoying time with our family and enjoying time doing things that we used to enjoy, there is a red flag there, and we need to do something about it. So,
Well, I have personal experience with just similar to you, with mental health and with suicide and with all of that, and it is a difficult thing to comprehend for someone that's never had those thoughts or experiences. And so when I think about it, I think about all those calls, yes, but I think about the idea that I can never truly convey to someone the impact that those things have on me.
mhm.
And so in that, you begin to feel like, okay, well, then I might as well keep it to myself. And then that compounds, and you just keep doing it over and over again until eventually all your head is filled with is darkness, and
Yeah.
and you just can't escape it, is what it feels like. Now, the reality is that you can escape it. You can talk about it. You can survive it. But like you said, if somebody's in the topic of suicide, if somebody's made that decision, that's just what they're going to do.
It is.
Um,
It is. And it's nobody's fault. That's you know
no,
what I mean? It's not anyone's fault for not picking up on them being sad or whatever. People can be laughing with you one minute, go home and get that, that overwhelming, consuming darkness, will hit them, and they're going to commit suicide. It's not preventable, I don't think, because one minute they're fine and the next they're not.
right.
And I like you, I've been in that deep dark hole, and it's hard to climb out of. And I think once you have been in that dark place, I think you understand more, and you can see when somebody's not acting right. Doesn't mean they're suicidal, but you might just go up and say, "Hey, everything going okay?" And you might brighten that person, you know what I mean, a little bit, if you would just initiate that conversation. It's hard in the first responder world, though. I ain't even gonna lie. It's tough to talk about. I don't know why everybody's under the assumption that we got these superhero capes and that entitles us to no feelings anymore. You know what I mean? Because there's been a lot of times I'll go on a call, I can do my job just fine, but when I get home, I break. I
Right.
break and I cry, because I've seen something that touched my heartstrings. You know what I mean? And it was sad. But that's, it's part of being human.
Well, and I would say, you mentioned not having feelings. I have, and just like many, have created this self-defense mechanism where I try to not have feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And what that's done is, I mean, I even at times have heard my kids describe me as, oh, it's okay, my dad doesn't have feelings. Which is hard to hear because, that's probably not true. But it is what I've done to protect myself from dealing with things. And that is what's caused so much damage, is convincing myself that I don't need feelings. I don't have to have them.
Mm-hmm.
They're weakness, and they keep me from being able to be strong and do things that I need to do. And now I'm on the education side, and I don't have to feel that way anymore. But it's pretty hard to escape it once you've done it for several years. Most of us, what we'll do is when we start to bring up these hard topics, we'll start to joke about it. Like it's humorous.
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism.
Yes. Yeah. And I've done a whole podcast episode about that, but I'm currently doing my doctorate, and I keep having to read all this research. It's endless, and so I'm learning lots of different things. And I learned a new term that they use in the UK called gallows humor. And I mentioned that to you before we started. So gallows humor is basically dark humor.
Yeah.
That's what it means. It's making light of something that should be absolutely serious.
Right.
And we do this all the time in the first responder community. You see it with military and veterans. They do the same thing. They'll take something like, oh, I saw somebody die. They don't have a head. It was hilarious. And
even though it's not hilarious, that is our coping mechanism.
Yeah,
truly.
yeah. It's like an awkward thing we do. But the problem is I've started to translate that into like everyday situations. And so like I do a lot of volunteering to coach youth sports and stuff like that. And these kids will tell me things, and sometimes I'll make like some kind of dark joke about it. And I'm like, oh man, like you can't do that. They don't get that. That's not funny to them. But I had to preface all of that. I had this conversation with the parents from one of the teams I coach. And I was just like, look, parents, your kid is going to come home one day and tell you that Coach Judd was making jokes about dead people. And I just want you to know, like, that's not necessarily something I'm doing like in like a gross way. It's more like that's how I deal with things out of just habit. So I promise I'm not saying anything crazy to your children. It's just little comments that are funny to me, but probably not to anybody else. So on that note, let's start with that. Do you think humor is a healthy way to deal with hard problems with emotions and problems?
I think when we're out there on scene, and things are hard, scenes are hard, and you can tell there's a lot of, a lot of buildup of feelings. I think humor is a good thing. I honestly do. I think it keeps us going, I guess, in a way. That dark humor, like I said, whenever I'm on scene, I can get through it. I'm even talking dark humor with the rest of them. Don't get me wrong. I'm getting through it the best way that I know how. It's after the call, whenever the report is written, and I go home to my family, and then I start thinking about that call. Like, what could I have done better? Why did I lose that patient? Or you know what I mean? There's a lot of things just going through my mind as to how I could have done that call better. And I think we as first responders put a lot of guilt on ourselves, and guilt is probably the thing that really drives us, you know what I mean, to sadness, I guess you could say.
Probably true. Yeah, and I don't know where the feeling of guilt even comes from, because even if I think about it now, like I can't really think of a time when somebody died because I wasn't good at my job.
Right.
If they died, it was because what happened to them was impossible for me to be able to fix.
That's true.
In that situation.
I think with me, just in my personal journey, I have had a lot of guilt, but I've lost a loved one out in the field,
Yeah.
and where I was first on scene, and I was in full paramedic mode. I was checking for signs of life, didn't even know it was her. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't looking at the patient, I was looking for signs of life. And I think that in itself is a way of a coping mechanism type thing too. Um, and I didn't even realize it was her until my partner brought it to my attention. Hey, isn't that your cousin's car? And then I go back to my patient, and that's when I see her. I think that's where my guilt come from, whenever it wasn't that I couldn't save her. There was no saving her. She had injuries inconsistent with life, but I think just not knowing her, that it was her whenever I first felt her. I felt a lot of guilt from that for a lot of years, really.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't have, because I think I'm like that with, or was like that with every patient. That call changed my entire career. So I can't say that I'm like that anymore. I see patients for who they are now. But I think that was a coping mechanism that was kind of taken away from me during that call. So I don't have that anymore.
Yeah. And uh, it's something we do. It's like a switch we turn on where like the normal human response, you just turn it off so that you can manage these people. And I think that's something we have to do. I don't think that there's something wrong with that. And I get, like, in the moment you feel guilty about it and everything. But if we don't do that, when there are things we could do to save somebody, we might not think of them because we're emotional about the situation.
Yeah, we're emotionally attached to it, so we
Yeah.
wouldn't think about it. Yeah, I agree. I do.
So, I mean, the hard part is, and I think you'll hear this from anybody with PTSD, how do you turn that off?
You don't.
You don't.
Mm-mm.
Once you've taught yourself to do that, it is the easiest way to defend yourself or defend your mind.
Truly, truly. Yeah.
And it's also the most unhealthy way to do it. But it's a catch-22. Like, we have to do it to take care of that person. I can't sit there and be emotional and sad and still think clearly.
Exactly.
And so my mind shuts that off, and you become like a sociopath almost to try to fix the problem. And this is funny, but not funny. Every year, not every year, but every so often, I'll take like an online test to determine if I'm a sociopath. Every year, I cross my fingers thinking, oh God, has it finally happened? Turns out, no, I'm still okay. But it's sad because when you start to realize you're doing that out of the context of an emergency situation, it's like, why? Like, and this is a very personal example, but I'll give it anyways because I'm going to be pretty open throughout this whole thing. My wife will try to explain to me how she feels about something. And because it upsets me that she might feel bad about something, I shut my ability to respond to that normally completely off. And I'll just be there. And I'm listening, but I'm not giving any kind of real response to that thing. And it's not like anybody wants me to solve the problem. I finally learned women do not want you to solve their problem. They want you to hear the problem and care about the problem. And I know that when it's happening, but my mind, for whatever reason, decides, okay, I can't hear that and I can't deal with it. So I'm just not going to. And I will stare at her as if I'm staring through the wall. And it's just like, why would you do that? And realistically, it puts a strain on our ability to communicate. And it's something that I've got to continue to work on. But it's that kind of damage that gets done to people in our world that leads them to the point where they're like, well, I don't care about anything. I'm not any good to anybody. So maybe the best thing for everybody is if I'm just not here anymore. And I think that's, I've had that thought more than once. I've had it for months at a time where I felt like that was the solution.
I've had that thought many, many times. A lot of people say, oh, suicide, it's so selfish. It's just so selfish. It's not selfish.
Yeah, when you're
per
thinking
se.
about it, that's not how you're thinking about it.
I'm not thinking, oh, I want my pain to end. That's not really what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, oh, I became an absent wife. I never tell my husband I love him. I hardly ever hug him. I'm an absent mom most of the time. And after Tracy's death, I took on 2 more counties. I worked all the time. Our son's adoption had just finalized, and he was only like 13 months old. And I stayed gone most of the time, working in different counties as a medic, and I was that absent wife and I was that absent mom, and I was just living on self-pity pretty much. And if I slowed down, then my mind would take over and I would become sad. And
Yeah.
so I have to stay busy. Even to this day, I have periods in my life where I have to stay busy. I have to keep my mind busy. Probably not as busy as I keep it right now, but
Yeah, it's a little rough.
with the children and college and school and you know what I mean, everything. But I had to keep my mind busy, or I would fall apart. I would break. And I'm not one that likes to cry in front of people. I don't like to share my feelings. You would think that I would get used to that sort of thing, because I'm always telling people you have to talk about what's wrong. And if every class that I've taught now, they get a mental health, lecture from me. I give them my testimony about how I almost took my life at work, no less. And had it not been for my husband sending me a text saying, "Hey, I know that was a tough call. I know you're writing reports. I've got Bobby fed, bathed, and in the bed. And how long are you going to be? I got dinner on the table, and I love you." And I'm like, this poor stupid man, he still loves me. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, Traven, you idiot.
He's so good to me. He has always, and he has loved me through so much. I don't think people realize how hard it is on the spouse whenever we get in those deep, dark pits. And, I'm lucky to have a first responder as a husband that I can talk to, about these different calls and things, and without hurting him, because
Yeah.
we can hurt our loved ones just by describing a scene. Your mind's going to make it 100 times worse than, you know what I mean, than if you were actually on scene. So I try not to talk about scenes with people that are not first responders. And I'm always telling my students, we have access to help you. You know what I mean? We have people that have been vetted. They've been first responders, and we can get you a counselor. You know what I mean? We can
Yeah.
get you in touch with a counselor. I tried counseling with a counselor that was not a first responder, and I think I gave that poor woman PTSD just talking to her about what I did for a living. I mean,
Oh, I'm sure there's some
it
people
was-
that aren't prepared to hear the things they think they are.
because she was like, "Well, how often do you actually see death?" And I'm like, "Well, depending on the
Weekly?
the month, but at least once a week.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I could say I could go a week without seeing somebody die, but sometimes that's just not the case.
Yeah.
And I don't think they get that. And the one thing that she did say, whenever I was talking to her, she goes, "Oh, I thought the firemen had everything cleaned up before the paramedics ever got on scene." I was like, "Man,
Cleaned
I
up?
wish."
What are they cleaning up?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But like I said, she was clearly not a first responder at any point
No.
in her life. But she was beautiful, and she really did try to help me. But I could not get that rapport with her. You know what I mean? To where I would really open up and talk to her, because I felt like I couldn't make her understand my world,
Right.
and I was no longer a part of her world. Once you enter that first responder world, there's no going back. You know what I mean? Nothing's
No.
ever really normal. You see things totally different, and even your outlook on life and people and everything is totally different. Because you see things. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
my husband, he's a police officer. He sees the worst. You know what I mean? Like the bad people. Me, I see people in pain or in sorrow or whatever. You know what I mean? But your outlook becomes totally different as a first responder.
Oh, I agree 100%. And it never leaves you. You would think the longer you spend off the truck, you just forget it, and it doesn't work that way.
No.
The reality is people in positions like this are seeing things that people just aren't meant to see. And we have to. That's the choice we've made. And I want anybody that's not a first responder listening to this, I want you to understand, I'm not invalidating what you've done. If you're a military veteran, if you have a different type of job, all jobs have difficult parts to it. And especially military, you guys see very similar and worse things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the idea here is, though, the body and the mind has pretty much the same defense mechanism that causes all these problems. And then the biggest trick that we play on ourselves is that we're alone and that nobody will understand. And so instead of talking to our spouses or our friends or whatever, and I agree, sometimes there's things that I don't say to my wife about what I've seen because I don't want her to take that pain.
Yeah.
Even though I think that she's strong enough to handle whatever I can tell her, I'm sure. But we assume that there's just no way that you can share this. There's no way that somebody else will fully understand. You're in this pit all alone. And it just isn't the case. Like, we're sitting here telling anybody that's listening, we're in the exact same spot as you. And we're not even unique.
I'm hoping that more and more departments take this seriously. You know what I mean? Like, when there's a critical incident, after my cousin died, there was no critical incident stress debriefing or management or even, really anything. There wasn't anything. And so I just bottled all of that up. And it was months after this happened that I just blew up, in report one day. And my EMS director was like, "You need help." And I'm like, "Yeah, I probably do."
Yeah, duh, man.
So, yeah, exactly. And luckily, he got me in touch with such a wonderful man that helped me through so much. His name's Nathan Hines. He's amazing. And he's in this neck of the woods and he's willing to help anybody. He's a wonderful man. But anyway, I took that incident and I just wanted to learn everything I could about mental health. And I feel a calling, I think, from God about this, like taking it deeper, getting my education, maybe helping, becoming a first responder, counselor, maybe. But it wasn't until my best friend's brother committed suicide. And Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance reached out to her to make sure that the family was okay because they are survivors of a suicide now. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
He had a young boy at that time, and it just hurt. It hurt everybody, and anyway, they reached out to her, and they are so good. They track all the suicide rates of firefighters, EMS professionals, and dispatchers. And once a year, they take these families and they get them, a nice room somewhere and away from life, basically. You know what I mean? And they can talk about their loved ones and remember their loved ones. They have one night where they ask all the departments, "Hey, at this certain time, we want you to turn on all the lights on your vehicles, your emergency vehicles, in remembrance of those that lost their lives to suicide." And I think that's kind of a cool thing. And
well, they're creating a community.
Yeah, they are.
So that people don't feel alone.
Exactly. And they don't. And Jeff Deal is the founder of this organization. He's amazing. And he helped me through some really hard times personally. Let me call him and talk to him about a lot of things. And after I lost Tracy, and he's just been an amazing supporter. He's given me so much support. But this is an amazing thing. They have a workshop called Saving Those Who Save Others. They even have the family edition of this so that the family understands when that first responder comes home and they're just not feeling, like you feel like they're preoccupied or something. They usually are. They're thinking about that day or whatever. But he makes it to where you feel normal again. Just talking to him. All these trauma responses are actually normal responses. We're just not taught that when we're in school,
Right.
And so I think whenever we're, at the end of our skills labs and stuff, and I finally open up conversation about mental health, I think that helps me help our students, just kind of understand you got to take care of your mental health just like you do your physical health.
Well, I think the concept that you're talking about is similar to like like a peer tutoring system. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to explain how I feel, and in that it will help me and it will help you.
Exactly.
And so I'm teaching you my knowledge, which is actually increasing my wisdom
Mm-hmm.
and giving you more knowledge. And so it's the thing that if we truly care about the next generation that's doing this,
And we do.
yes, we do. Our school does. And if we as other first responders want these people to be able to come in and do the job that you've done for all these years, you have got to introduce them to the idea that they're not alone in this and that it's okay to talk about it. And the hard part is as we fight against these old dog veterans sometimes, and I don't mean military veterans, I mean veterans of the job.
Yeah, exactly.
Who will tell you that no, you don't share your feelings.
Yeah.
No, that's stupid.
Yeah.
You're being weak if you do that. And that mindset is why there are so many dead first responders.
Yep.
And so you mentioned early on, there is no way to prevent suicide, but there are ways to, I think there are ways to try to manage the thought.
Right. Yeah. Just letting people know they have somewhere to turn is going to help that.
Yeah.
I just hate to say the word prevention because that makes people think, you know, those loved ones that are close to that person that committed
they can
suicide.
convince them.
I should have done something. I should have been able to prevent this. I don't want them feeling like they should have been had some way to prevent that.
Yeah,
So-
no, and you really don't. Like you can't. It's almost like an alcoholic. Like
Yeah.
you can't convince them not to drink alcohol. They have to do
Exactly.
that on their own.
Yeah.
And all you can do is give them reasons to want to be here. And they may or may not see those reasons. They may not comprehend that at the time. I know that you mentioned your family pulled you away from it, and mine is the same. My wife and my kids. I can't imagine making them deal with that whole process. And wondering, was it their fault and that kind of thing. And so that has pulled me away from that many times. And I'm sure it will again someday. And so I wish we could come into this conversation and be like, here's 5 steps to prevent suicide.
Yeah, me too. I would give anything.
Yeah, and you can't. There are not 5 steps. There's only hope. That's all there is hope, prayer, and compassion.
Yeah. I always say, you know, you got to have faith, you know, in something. You got to have faith in something. That's what keeps me going, you know, daily is my faith in God and that he's always with me. He's always going to get me through this, you know, even when I'm struggling, you know, and I think I'm all alone, I'm not alone, you know, but knowing that there's people out there that feel exactly the same way that I feel, and it's okay to call on them during that time of maybe an emotional break. And I think that would probably be, I guess, if you wanted to call it prevention, that's the best way we could do that is to make it okay. It's okay to not be okay. And we need to make that known in the first responder world. And I think there's a lot of departments that don't have things in place for their people. And it needs to be a mandatory thing, I would think, because there's so many things that we see out there that you just can't unsee, and it's hard. It's hard as a person to know how to get all of that and process it in your head. But talking about it, and there's a lot of data out there. I can't, you know, mumble it off right now, but there's a lot of data out there that says if you'll talk about it, your brain releases it. And you actually don't have to live with everything trapped inside your brain, like for instance, you and I do, because we never talked about it, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I was telling one of my classes, I'm like, yeah, I took my son to Universal Studios, and I started crying on one of the rides, and he's like, hey, Mom, is it something I did? I said, no, baby, Mommy's just broken. You know, I just see some things sometimes, and it catches me off guard, you know, and we shouldn't have to explain that to 7-year-olds. You know what I mean? We should be able to live our life. And had I just openly talked about the trauma that I had experienced, maybe I wouldn't live the kind of life that I live now, you know? And so I try to prevent that in my students. I love EMTs. I love teaching the EMT class because I'm catching them on that foundation level where they haven't got out there in the field yet and they haven't been exposed, hopefully, to, those horrific things that we sometimes see. And I can tell them and just warn them, take care of yourself now from the get-go, and you're going to have a great career and you're going to have a great life, and you'll be able to find that balance, mentally. Because if your mental health goes, your physical health is not far behind, and then it goes down from there. So
I used to be super fit.
yeah, I've never been super
And then
fit.
my stupid brain killed my fitness.
Aw.
Also, eating hamburgers killed my fitness.
Yeah,
too.
well, Little Debbie killed my fitness.
Little Debbie.
Yeah. Fitting them all in my mouth.
That little jerk.
Yeah.
Gosh darn little girl.
I love Little Debbie's. Those little snack
gosh.
cakes. All of them, too. I mean, I'll eat any box of them.
Oatmeal pies were like where it was at today.
Hey, I got some in my drawer at home right now.
I don't buy them because I know I'll eat them, but like then there's always like cake or something up here, and it's like so difficult. We're about to leave this room and go eat a bunch of cake for a baby shower.
I know. They're lucky I didn't cut it before.
I don't even know who's having a baby. I'm just kidding. So anyways, this is a conversation that we could have a million times over and think of different things that we really want to talk about, but I like where we're at with it right now, and so I don't want to drag it out and force us to bring more.
We could talk about it all day, but the thing is, the main point we needed to take away really from here is it's okay to not be okay, and let's talk about mental health. Let's make it a normal thing to talk about if we're not feeling okay.
I agree, and coming from people that have tried to hide it and mask it with humor and whatever else we've come up with over the years, it doesn't help. You're putting a very poorly made off-brand Band-Aid on a problem that needs stitches and much, much more. And you just can't fix the problem that way. So trust your family, trust your friends. You can talk to people. They may not always know what to say, but that's not the important part. The important part is that you can say what you need to say, and you can put it out there, and you can give people the opportunity to support you. So that's what I would leave everybody with. Yeah. There are, I believe, in our description of this, we're going to put some information about suicide hotline and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that people have a resource to reach out to in an emergency. Don't be afraid. I know it can be an embarrassing situation to have to call for help, but you need to be willing to do that because somebody else is going to suffer from decisions that we make, and it's not going to fix anybody's problems.
Yeah, and their testimony may pull somebody else out of that deep, dark place one of these days. So
it'll be the ladder that gets them out, maybe. Okay. Well, as always, if you or someone you know is interested in learning more about EMS or furthering your EMS career by becoming a paramedic or an EMT, we encourage you to go to our website, www.texasemsschool.com. You'll get to meet Miss Melissa here. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. You'll get to meet Melissa probably in a skills lab. You may see me if you come to one of our Abilene skills labs, and we'd love to meet you guys and talk to you and maybe one day have you come here and tell us about your experiences. So I'm Judd, this is Melissa, and this has been EMTalk.
True stories about saving lives from the people that save them. This is EMTalk. EMTalk is sponsored by Texas EMS School. Join Juddson Smith again next time because the life he's saving could be yours.